first steps will be mounting the electric motor on it. You can either do nitro or electric. I'm going to be using the electric motor. This is the motor that was in my Seagull that crashed a couple weeks ago. I'll be putting that in. Servos, it calls for some micro servos for the flaps, standard servos and mini servos for the ailerons, elevator, and rudder. Just a quick glance in my airplane room. I have a garage in the back that I should really concentrate on fixing up, putting a room in, so I would have more room for all these planes. As it stands now, I really don't have room for any more planes. So, go through the instructions. I think what we need so far right now is the firewall, or the mount for the electric motor. This Hellcat is an advanced model. I think the instructions said 6-hour build time, but I'm not going to be in any hurry. The first steps, as mentioned, will be the electric motor install. We'll start with that, and we'll give you updates as we go along. Okay, the first step is to mount the motor on its plate by aligning the holes up on the lines, which I have done. Now I just have to mark the holes and then drill it with a 3mm bit. Okay, the 4 holes for the motor mount are drilled. I took this out to my drill press, drilled the 4 1/8 inch holes, and they line up as expected. So the next step is to center the motor mount plywood on the front of the fuselage, then mount the motor to here, this piece of plywood, and then the whole assembly mounted to the front firewall here. So the next step is to align these lines with the lines here on the firewall. But the problem with that is, putting this down, you can't see those lines. So I'm going to extend these lines, then line this up, mark the holes that need to be drilled, and then proceed with mounting the motor on this, the engine assembly or motor assembly onto the fuselage itself. I have the lines extended out, but looking at it, it's definitely not centered on the firewall here. It's over, as we're looking at it, to the right. And lining up the lines on the engine mount, you can tell more. It's definitely over to the right. It's about 20 millimeters or so off center. I'm sure it's correct, but I want to make sure before I proceed that this is supposed to be off center like this. So I did a little bit of research, and I did find a web page of a build of this plane, and it does have the engine mounted a little bit off center to the right. So we are good to go to proceed with getting this motor mounted. So I'll line up the lines. I'll mark the holes that will be drilled with a 5mm drill bit. When I get that done, I'll be back. I have the holes drilled now with a turns out to be a 1364 drill bit, and they do line up nicely.
The next steps are to install the bolts through the firewall that will be used to mount the motor assembly on.
So we get into the bag of goodies. The screws and everything should be in here. We'll open up the bag, get the screws, and proceed with mounting the motor. I have the hardware for the motor mounts, the bolts, washers, and nuts ready. I'll show you installation of one bolt. The top two bolts aren't going to be an issue. There's plenty of room up on the top up here. These bottom two, you can see down here, not enough room above this wood here to go straight in to the let the bolt go straight in through the hole. So I'm gonna have to finagle somehow this bolt in between or below this firewall, or this not firewall but the plywood here, and there's another structure wall just beneath this. So I'm gonna have to finagle it underneath this to fit into that hole. So the assembly consists of the bolt, a washer, have it come through the hole, another washer. It didn't have split washers, but I'm going to add one, and I'll probably might add some Loctite as well once I get all the bolts installed. Snugged it up for right now. I'll tighten these when I get everything done, and then there'll be another nut screwed on, and then once the motor is mounted to the plywood here, this will go on and bolted on. Another washer, another nut. So once I have all this done, the motor front end will be assembly will be complete. Just to show you real quick how I'm getting these bottom screws in, have to go in at a little bit of angle through these bottom holes here and up through the other wall. I can't see from here, and then line it up and and I just screw it in. This is at an angle, it'll grab. So let me get these bottom two done. We'll be back. Okay, I have the 4 bolts mounted. Tighten up with the lock washer and Loctite. Next step is to mount the motor to the plywood, and then mount the motor to the these bolts. I have the hardware out of the bag for the mounting the motor to the motor mount using 3mm screws. It didn't call, or Allen wrench hex screws, I guess. Didn't call for washers behind the nut, but I'm going to do that. So I'll just show you one. The bolt, the washer, and the nut. Actually, I'll do all of them. Bolt, washer, and the nut. I'll Loctite these in once I'm ready to screw them, tighten them up. Leaving them loose until I get them all started and in. All right. Then this will mount on here. I'm going to have the wires of the motor come out the bottom so they go through the opening here at the bottom of the firewall. Let me tighten these up and we'll mount it to the plane itself. So I have the motor mounted to its mounting plate. I've already kind of eyeballed the screw of the top, or the nuts of the top screws or bolts to the location that these should be in. We'll mount the plate on to the plane. The distance from the firewall to the front edge of the motor should be between 106 to 108 millimeters. I have it eyeballed right now to about 108 millimeters. Next step I'll do is make sure all the bolts are the same distance. The bottom equals the top distance. So I'll work on that now, and then once I'm satisfied with that, I will screw it in place. I'm not going to Loctite it yet until I'll do the Loctite once I get the cowling on and make sure it's all the proper distance and everything. I have the motor mounted to the firewall via the 4 long bolts. Right now they're just snug. Once I get the cowling on, I'll make any final adjustments to the distance that the motor sticks out from the cowling. But right now, from the firewall to the motor right here is about 108 millimeters. Again, once you get the cowling on, make sure all is good. Then I will lock tight the bolts down. I don't like the way this bolts, it's kind of interfering with these motor wires. So once everything is towards the final assembly, I'll probably get the Dremel out and shorten that bolt. So this concludes step 1 of mounting the motor.